So, welcome into the True Man podcast. I really enjoy talking with entrepreneurs and small business owners. Now, this is especially true today because if you know me, you know, if I show up with a tool or something from my garage, my wife is about to break out in a cold sweat. So, handy around the house, that ain't me. So, maybe I'll learn a thing or two today. So, welcome to the show. Chris Lalomia. I knew I was going to do that. Chris Lalomia. Lalomia. Oh my gosh. How about that?
That's all right. It's Chris Lalomia.
Lalomia. Could you change that to Smith, please?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Just it's okay. I do this every show, so it doesn't matter. Everybody's used to it. So he is the founder of the Trusted Toolbox. Just saying that makes me think of all the things that need to be done around here. But Chris is a successful entrepreneur and change leader that has built on his experience working with the largest companies in America to start his own business from scratch. He brings his unique style of leadership to build a culture of professionalism to the blue collar world of home renovations. Chris also has a podcast called The Small Business Safari. Chris, welcome to the show. I apologize for shattering your name.
I'm good with it. Nobody, I always tell all my guys too, don't ever try to say my last name. Just go with what you know best. And that is what you like to call yourself.
I'm just glad that everybody challenges me when they come on the podcast. Anyway. So Chris, even I would admit that, swinging a hammer, or hearing some power tools is pretty manly stuff, right?
It is.
But starting the Trusted Toolbox, that was a real pivot point for you in your life. And, so tell us a little bit about that and how everything got started. And
so I had a job. I was at SunTrust Banks at the time. I was a senior vice president reporting to the chief risk officer who reports to the CEO. Yeah, I had that job. I was in the corner office, had the parking spot, the Mercedes, the custom suits, 400 people working for me. And I realized I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. I came home in a rage, told my wife, threw my tie across the room and said, "That's it, I'm done." And she went, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. You better figure out what you're going to do." I said, "I've always told you I'm going to start my own business. I don't care if I have to live in a trailer park. I'm going to do this." And she's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa again. You better figure out what you're going to do." But for me, that was that gut turning moment, that pivot point.
Yeah. So why were you miserable? Dive into that.
Yeah,
there's a lot of this going on across the country now where
I realized I was I wrote a book called From the Zoo to the Wild. I realized I was in the corporate zoo and they were feeding me these great bananas that were usually alcoholic drinks after work. And it kept me nice and happy that way. And I was making a lot of money and I was told I was very important. And they kept saying, "Wow, look at you. You're so good." So you got kind of numb to it. But the breakout point for me was I realized that I had a lot of responsibility, but I didn't get to make the choices, and the choices were made for me and were forced on me. And it was hard to lead a team and be a culture leader when all you're doing is being told that it had to be this way. And don't you dare give me an independent thought right now, because that's not where to go with a corporate team. So I felt like I was using half my brain. Yeah. And it just started to wear off the numbness and the intoxication of having the power and what I thought was authority, but really was not. And I didn't like the way it was going for me. At one point, I realized I had 40 hours of just meetings, 40 hours of meetings. And I went and color coded each one of them and gave them a name. They were CYA, they were get status, give status, and then justify my existence. And that's all I did all week for 40 hours. And then the rest of the time I went out and worked and did everything else I was supposed to be doing. So
I think you and my wife could have a very good conversation about meetings.
So I was, as they say, the alien in the room. I was always a little bit different, meaning I had an entrepreneurial bent. I feel like I'm an independent thinker and I want to use my brain. I just felt like I wasn't doing what I wanted to do, but more importantly, I wasn't giving everything that I could do. I wasn't contributing to the world.
Yeah.
And that sounds really big and far reaching. And I do donate to charities, but I haven't given a full effort into that. But that was the point. So I had evaluated a number of options. I am actually pretty handy at the house. So I have a little bit more in my toolbox than a credit card and a hammer. Can do some things around to do some stuff. But I realized also those were almost all my vacations growing up as a kid. times that I would take off and do things. I renovated our house. I did a lot of other things, and I enjoyed it. It was a passion of mine with houses. So I explored that passion to see if I could make some money at it, obviously, and provide for my family. I was 33, 37 at the time when I realized that, boy, this just wasn't for me. And I started off on the venture, and it's been 14 years. And I did it, but I'm that overnight success. It just took me 14 years.
Wow. Now, how did it really go down? Tell us how it really went down.
So it didn't go down like everybody thinks it is. It's not all sunshine and roses, especially when you start your own business. I sold that Mercedes, bought 2 white vans, put myself in one, wrapped them. I hired a technician, and off we go. And I'm off to make, and I told my wife in my business plan, don't worry, I'm going to make millions of dollars. I'm going to get right back up to that same level. And it doesn't happen like that. We all want to hear those entrepreneurial stories where you bootstrapped and you backstart your credit card and you started it, and next thing you know, you're making $1 million in 30 days. And those are so few and far between. What I found was by staying focused on the habits and pivoting and solving problems, I wake up every morning thinking, all right, today's another day to solve problems. And that's what we have to do as entrepreneurs, as small business owners, to solve those problems. So I would say I slowly built my business, but I also started my business right when the recession hit in 2008. And so I was up against a lot of headwind here in the Atlanta market. And so it forced me to grow slower, which was probably good in the long run. But also revenue limiting.
It's interesting, when you talk about the timing, because I bought a house where the home builder was apparently, I mean, I'm not familiar with this market. So it was a custom home builder who ultimately went out of business during the recession when you were starting your business. And as best I can tell, piece together just from talking with people, they were trying to go too quick given the market. And you're saying the opposite, like, well, I was going slow. I didn't like it at the time, but probably turned out to be a blessing.
It did. It truly was. The term blessing is the right way to put it. While it was tough, as I tell a lot of people, you can have those first 4 years back. I wasn't making any money. I had a lot of those lonely nights on the couch sitting there going, what have I just done to my family? What have I done to myself? And I had somebody tell me, when you start your own business, you're not really an entrepreneur until you got to scramble and make payroll. And sure enough, I had to go get a check on Thursday night from a lady at 4:15 because I had to be to the bank by 4:30. I drove to her house, got the check, got to the bank, got it in by 4:30, and made payroll. And I was thrilled that everybody got paid that morning except me. And that's how it went for quite a while. And that's
how did that
the
feel?
true story.
How did that feel?
It felt great until I started looking at that happening. That wasn't happening all the time, but I wasn't getting paid in the beginning. I was investing back in the business, trying to grow the business, do the right things. Felt like I could put those right processes in place and really start to refine not only my business model, but who are my target customers. And that's where the slow growth really helped, because in the beginning, I would do anything to anybody at any time. If you wanted me to work on your house and you said gutters, I'd say, yes, I'm doing it. Okay, Chris, it's 40 feet in the air. You bet, no problem. Now, we found our niche. We know where we're going. We can provide a great service model. And I've got the team built like that to get me back to where my strengths are in terms of leadership and culture. But it was a long slog and it was tough. And when people say you're going to go out there and do that, we love hearing the richest story that happens really quick. And in my case, I had a lot of money socked away. I used all of it and remortgaged my house.
Whoops.
Oh boy. Yeah. So it was a long haul. Would I do something different? You bet. I would have done things differently. Every time I say I made a mistake, I had somebody counteract that and say, well, Chris, you actually just learned a lesson. I said, I understand that, but why does it always cost me so much flipping money?
Yeah, well, it's a good, yeah. Well, I ask myself that question all the time, usually after my wife asks that question. But that's beside the point. So if you had to thinking back on it, what's one big piece of advice that you would give your old self?
At what point?
Well, back in the beginning, like if there was something you would do different starting over? Like what advice would you give that person?
I would say, hey, buddy, you're doing the right thing with the business plan. You're definitely doing the right thing. I built a business plan, had a 3-year performer on it. I went out there and asked people smarter than me to give me feedback on independent pieces of the business plan, which I actually put in my book. I wasn't there to write the perfect term paper or that paper that felt like it was an A. I was out there to solve problems. What I did not do a good job of was finding people in the industry already and asking them to give me feedback, because I figured they would consider me competition or a competitor, because that's what we know in corporate America. You don't do that. You don't share your plan unless you need something from them and it's aligned with their plan. And looking back on it now, I've done this with actually 3 different handyman companies and people. They said, can I come talk to you? I'm like, sure. And I flipped my QuickBooks around and I showed them everything. And they're like, I can't believe you're showing me this. I'm like, dude, this is a really hard business. And until you understand that and what it's going to take to do it, I'm happy to share all of it, because I want more people out there who are good in the market, because there's plenty to go around. So I would have said, get people in the industry. I did get some advice from one guy. So why don't you go work for a remodeling company first and then start? And I went, no, I'm too smart for that. I can't do that. And I think, again, slower growth, learning on somebody else's dime for a little while would have been a good piece of advice as well.
You really bring up something interesting, I think, and because I talk about this quite often, and since presumably it's mostly men that are listening to the show, my question to you is, why do people not go to other people for help? Right? I encourage this all the time, and listen, I got a full disclosure. I've struggled with this, right? I'm like, I'm going to figure everything out on my own, come hell or high water. And I'm now to the point where I'm putting people and their partnerships, right? They don't work for me, but I have a team around me that is moving me to the next level. And it took me a long time to figure out that I got to surround myself with the right people. I can't get there on my own. And
it's hard for us, especially as strong, independent men. If that's who listens to this, and I believe they are, it's hard for us to admit that, hey, I need some help. And I need help this way, because that shows weakness, and weakness gets preyed upon. And we were taught that playing sports, what would you do? You'd always look for your opponent's weakness and exploit it. So we've always been taught not to collaborate unless they were on your team. Well, if you're not on my team, why would I share with you what I'm trying to do? Because you might go steal my idea. And that's the other big fallacy out there is, I don't care what idea you have. If you come talk to me and you're like, man, can I have you sign an NDA first? I'm like, dude, you can have me sign whatever. I don't have enough time right now to go start another business. I got enough going on as it is. So what do you want to know?
So what's a number when an entrepreneur comes to you? And there are a lot of people trying to figure it out in this world right now. I mean, I'm talking with people all over. They got side hustles. A lot of people have ditched the corporate arena. When somebody comes to you, what's the number one question they're asking you?
The number one question that I get asked from a lot of guys is, I'm thinking about doing this and starting, and I'm really excited, very optimistic. I'm like, yep. What's your question? I know you're pumped up. He goes, well, can I do it? I said, if you want the truth, usually it's, hey, how can I be successful like you? I said, well, if you want the truth, first of all, you got to define what success is. That's a hard question to answer. Yeah. But you've also got to be really ready to go through some pain and get ready for it. So that I usually give the advice back. It's, hang on, man. It's a blast. I mean, I definitely love that I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a small businessman doing this thing and growing and doing what we're doing, but you got to be ready. You got to have not only the money or the capacity, the physical ability to actually be able to handle it, and you got to have the mental ability, that toughness to know that times are going to be really tough and you're going to be down really low, and you better figure out that you can only be so high and so low, and you got to find a middle ground.
So this has, given everything that's going on in the economy right now, it has to be an extremely challenging time for a business like yours. I'm going through some working with a designer here in our house, and I'm doing some stuff in the yard, and I'm looking at stuff right now. And some of the first quotes that came back were like, what? Really? Like, are you serious? I've been down this road before. This is not possible. I mean, what challenges are you up against right now?
Let's think about all the challenges we've had even over the last 3 years. I talked about starting a business in the recession, and I figured that would be something that would be, 100-year event. We're not going to have a recession like we had because that was the Great Depression. Well, we just had it. Okay. So I started my business in it. Then we have this thing now that I didn't even know there was a word for it. And now they call it the pandemic. So we had coronavirus. So you had to pivot and solve problems through that. Then I came out and said, man, I'm going to have, because we got back to work pretty quickly, I'm going to have the best 3-year run I've ever had. And this is going to be great. And I couldn't find people to work. I'm like, okay, now nobody wants to work. So now I got to pivot and find out that. Now I get people back to work. And look what's going on with the materials. I just lost another job on a deck because I went back 45 days after the quote was given. He said, I need an update on the lumber and the composite deck pricing. He said, you'll need to add 15% to that. The guy came back. Man, dude, I think we're going to have to hold. He goes, I like you, but man, now these numbers are getting crazy. I'm like, I hear you. But there's nothing I can do about it. And then now this guy in Russia decides he wants to go off and start World War III. And now you're staring at that. I mean, as business owners, you got to think globally, act locally, but you've got to be able to pivot and go through that. So our big challenges right now is supply chain. I getting quotes right now where I can't get windows for 15 weeks. I'm getting these 15% changes. I talk to my suppliers. I have a very good relationship with the Home Depot. I have a Home Depot account rep and another local supplier. I talk to them. It used to be like every quarter. Now it's once a month at least, and sometimes even weekly. Like, what's going on now, dude? I mean, where are we going? And then we have this thing with the gas that's happening where, I have 20 vehicles. And if you think you're hurting at the gas pump by yourself with one vehicle, try looking at 20 Ford E250s or Chevy 2500s, and they're guzzling gas.
They're probably diesel too, right?
No, I did.
No,
but it's still, But actually one of my buddies who has a remodeling company has 4 diesel vehicles. And he said, how about filling those up? I'm like, dude, I know. But again, we can commiserate and we can sit here and, listen to this and you go, yeah, man, things are just so hard. You got to have that mental capacity to go, but it's a problem and it's a problem I got to solve. Because if I don't solve it, what's the other option? Is to not solve it and go out of business.
Yeah, no, it is pretty interesting. Now we just threw out like a bunch of things and it's pretty easy to go, wow, that you're kind of being negative, right? I mean, but those are the realities of business right now. So how do you pivot and stay positive and keep going? Because that's what it takes.
Yeah, I read some research that said that 90% of our thoughts are negative and 10% are positive. And I counter that with, sometimes mine can be 99.9% negative. You've got to have that problem solver mentality, the fix it thing, which again, back to the women and men studies, they said that men try to fix and women just want to relate. And that's that men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Model. Yeah. But you got to be a problem solver. And got to enjoy it and got to know that that's going to get you out through that. Another great line is that the reason you never stop in hell, we always go through hell because nobody ever wants to stop and stay. We want to go through it and get through it to the other side. So the only way to do that is to solve the problem and keep your head down and keep grinding.
And how are you doing that now? What makes you a great problem solver?
Yeah, I enjoy the problem solving activity. I think I enjoy pain a little bit, but I really love seeing my team now solve a problem that I didn't have to solve on my own. They solved that problem for me. So right now we're implementing some pretty tough profitability reports in our company, but my guys are putting this together. I had all my technicians and my handymen together and said, what should we do? And they're like, well, we're going to have to raise prices and probably add a fuel surcharge. So we can continue to do what we do best. And that's what you have to do. And it doesn't feel good. I mean, trust me, I don't want to add a fuel surcharge. I don't want to tell somebody, hey man, I know I gave you a quote 45 days ago, but now it's 15% more. And I know you think I'm an honest guy, but really in the back of your mind, you're thinking I'm trying to take one over on you. And the answer is no. So yeah, you stay positive with that. Knowing that you're going through it because you want to get through the other side.
So how would you define success given all this stuff that's going on? And now listen, I will tell you this. I had, to your point, the landscaping quote that I got back, I looked at the plants. Now I've done a ton of landscaping over the years. I looked at the plants and I went, you got to be kidding me. But I knew I had to do it. Right. Guy comes back and I said, man, the price of plants, right? Just like the wood you were describing, I'm like, is a little insane. I was anticipating a little bit, but this is like huge. And he actually told me the same thing that you just said. We're getting weekly updates on plants.
Yeah, I'm on the distribution for Site One, which is one of the major landscaping. Now I don't do any of that, but I just got on their distribution of it. Phenomenal way to explain what's happened to us with the supply chain. From the place that plant grows, it has to grow in soil. They have to get the soil there. And then once that plant is ready to go, it has to be taken up and put it into a pot. And then it has to be delivered to a holding place. And then the holding place has to deliver to the end place. And then the end place has to sell it to you. Somewhere in there, shipping has gone up, materials have gone up, labor has gone up, labor may not even be available. So I can't control any of those. So there's nothing you and I can do about that. So I can only solve the controllable problems I have. And that hits on exactly what you started with, was what do you call success? Well, I tell you, it's interesting for me, and we talk about faith, family, values, and you talk about money. It's always there. You want to have enough to be comfortable to do it. And I think the definition of success is definitely one that everybody always struggles with. And I had a guy on my own podcast come on. His definition was awesome, but he said, I realized that I had my ladder on the wrong building of success. And I had that epiphany moment when I had a panic attack in the middle of my auto mechanic shop, and I thought I was dying. So don't get to that point. Have that moment now when you're healthy, and be thinking about that. I mean, where do you want to be when you're 60 or 70? And because that's really old, because I'm not there yet. But even though I am old. So you start really going after it. What is success? And, enjoying life and doing things. And I really enjoy talking business and being with people on business. And I know you mentioned you're, after this, going to go out and do some networking and do some Rotary events. And that's the kind of stuff that I love doing. And so when we talk about what is success, I love the ability to be sitting here talking to you on a podcast in the middle of the day while my team's taking care of business for me. And so I love that stuff. And yeah, the money is now, sure. I get to do a lot of things that are really cool. But I really like to enjoy life, and I'm starting to do it more and more. My kids are now grown, one in college and one out of college. And we got more free time and more things to do. And now it's starting to be, fun. But I still like the business stuff. And I really get excited about it and nerd out on it.
Yeah, I do too, a little bit. And in fact, I want to ask you about this because you brought up business planning. And so I don't work with businesses as much anymore. So I don't talk about business planning, but I talk about goals, which is essentially a large part of what business planning is. So I'm kind of pivoting here a little bit, because how do you feel like setting the goals and the planning that you've done for your business have prepared you for that success? I think a lot of people fail to do this. And so that's why I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it.
That's a great one, because I have taken a couple bites at it. And it's one thing I thought was a strength of mine, but I'm really, really now starting to get it. And that is, today I have 30 employees. I took 18 of them, and we went and did a strategic meeting. So I asked them to take a Saturday morning and go with me, and to go away from their family and come along on a journey with me. But what I did was, I told them, I said, let's do a 1 year. You just close your eyes, in 1 year, what does success look like for you? And we did the whole thing, and I won't make it a long-winded story, but we came out of that. And when I realized what I had done is, by putting the goals of our company out there for 2 years and 1 year, and then letting them set their goals as part of that, they now said our goals, that means our teams together, goals are all lined up. And now we know what's in your crazy head, Chris, because the mad scientists in the corner, we had no idea you wanted to get to this big in 2 years. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And this is how we're going to do it, I think. What do you guys think? And they're like, yeah, and they're chiming in. So now I have line of sight. I have these people lined up on our goals, and we're coming up on the first quarter checkpoint. And so far, they've hit them all. And things are looking good right now, even in this crazy world. And that's one of those big things is success. You got to celebrate those successes. And I'm not very good at that. But doing that with the team has been awesome.
Well, yeah. So I was just going to say, you're including them in the vision. And that's what we're talking about. And so like in my coaching business, we talk about the what, why, and how you're going to get there for your vision. And by including them, it becomes inclusive, not exclusive to you. And they're putting out as a result, right?
They are. And like I said, I've had a couple of missteps with it because I would do that strategic meeting, right? And I've done it 3 times now since I started my business. I did it back in corporate America every year. And, you have that great meeting, you come off that meeting and a Monday morning, you're like, oh, I'm such a high. And it happened again this year, right? I was on a big high. I'm like, oh, here we go. We're going to do it all again. And on Monday, one lady had a blister on her foot, so she couldn't come into work, even though she just answered the phones. 2 guys contracted COVID, as we found out. A lot of us all contracted COVID from that COVID spreader event. So I had a lot of people out, and we suffered through a couple of weeks of that. And I was like, oh, here we go again. And what I did this year is I said, okay, I'm going to pivot and do this. And what I do now is I do a 30-minute monthly update with them. Bring them all in the office and just do 30 minutes of here's where we're going. Here's what's going on. I'll see you guys again in the summer, and we're going to have a little extra time there, but just let's stay on point. And each one of them is assigned on one of the things we're working on and feels accountable for it. And that's been pretty cool to see the action coming out of strategic meetings, because we've all been through them in corporate America. You go to them the first couple of times, you're like, hey man, I'm at Disney World. Awesome. Hey, I get to go to Universal Studios on Tuesday night all by myself. Ooh, I'm really cool. I'm a big thing. I'm part of a strategic plan. And then you had no idea what it was about. You never heard about it again, never thought about it again, went back to work.
Yeah. In fact, I'm willing to bet, I'm taking a gamble here, that like people know what the mission and the vision is with your organization. I bet in corporate America, half the people just think it's a poster on the wall.
I agree with that. I 100%. I think they do. I've said this, and I actually had somebody help facilitate that meeting. And I said, I want you to take a pulse of this group as well. We use a mission plaque, not a mission statement. So there's just very few words on it. It's in our training room, and we highlight that. And we also have a word of the year we use for our company every year. This year, our word is altitude and attitude. Your attitude reflects your altitude.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
and working,
like that.
Yeah. And so that's been working really well. And the guy confirmed what I was thinking is that I've got, this is not all roses here at the company, but I've got 18 people in that room, and I would say they would ride or die with a trusted toolbox and Chris. Now, when you ask them the next question, do you think that your teammates have the same level of commitment that you do? The answer resoundingly would be no. So I have a teamwork issue I got to work on. So it's not all roses. And I guess what? I get to go solve another problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know that we're looking for perfection here, but I mean, it's, I just love to hear the fact that you're taking those steps, because the people, feel included in their success. And
when I first started the business, so it was just me, and I hired a technician. All right. Then I had 4 technicians, and I was the main sales guy. And then after 8 months, I hired my first office manager, who's still with me. And then we continually built the team. And I realized at one point too, that I can't just come in and spout off the top of my head what's in my crazy head as I'm walking through, as I'm going out to do estimates again. I had to start documenting things. And I was like, oh man, this is boring corporate crap. I don't want to do this again, but I had to. So you have to pivot. You got to do some of that stuff as well. And you're constantly evolving as a leader. And I think one of the big things that I've heard and I agree with is that sometimes we're just not very self-aware. We have a lot of blind spots as leaders.
Yeah, I mean, it happens, but that you got to learn. We're always in training. That's how I look at it. I don't know that I've always looked at it, but I'm always in training. So that's just the way it is till the day I do.
Tough to do. I tell you what, the blind spots, and I have this accountability group that I meet with. I think you mentioned you have a mastermind as well at some point when we talked. And, I get in there and we talk, I'm like, I admit it. I got a blind spot with one of my employees. He's just a really nice guy. I really like him, and I let him get away with crap I shouldn't. So I had to admit it. And then I had to address it, because if I was letting him get away with it, the other guys were looking around going, well, how come he gets to get away with this? He's not part of our team. See, I'm in it to win it with you, Chris. He's not. So we had to address that. And he's taken to it pretty well. But it's those things, his blind spots as leaders, man. It's hard to admit. Again, back to the alpha male saying, hey, I'm wrong. I need some help. Ooh, that's tough.
Yeah. Well, it's important to go back and take a look in the mirror. Now, talking about looking in the mirror, I mean, I got a podcast. You got a podcast. We got to talk about your podcast, man. Tell us about the podcast, how all that, because I love hearing people's podcast stories, because I have one. So tell us about the podcast.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I love doing it because I love talking with people. I basically begged a friend of mine to be a co-host with me, who gets no benefit whatsoever out of doing the podcast, except he gets to come in here and drink beer with me while we do it. It is geared for aspiring entrepreneurs or people who want to scale their business in the home services area, or in any business that requires a lot of people. It's a gritty, insightful is what I call it. The Small Business Safari, or the safaripodcast.com is out there. We've had some great guests on there. I've learned a lot about my business as I bring people on. In fact, I'm going to probably beg you to come on too, because I want to read stuff on ours.
I get to come into the Safari.
Yeah, we're going to have you come in.
I love the logo, by the way. Guys, go out and look at the pie. Got a great logo.
Yeah, that's my personality in a nutshell. And you'll see that I'm running away from money. That big money ball is coming running at me, and I'm just running away from it, because I felt like that's all I did when I first started the business is, oh, you can make money there. Oh, I'm going to go over here. But yeah, we've had some great people on. I think we share some gritty real world advice. One of the other things that one of the impacts I want to make is I want to help younger people as well. So last year I had a summer entrepreneurship class that I facilitated last summer, kids from Kennesaw State, Georgia Tech. And I brought some other entrepreneurs, and we did like 4 or 6 sessions. But what we talked about in there is things we talk about on our podcast. These aren't things you don't get to hear about in books or listen to from professors. This guy's done it. And my co-host, he's done it. He is the most successful failed entrepreneur I've ever met. He got caught up in the 2008 recession running a furniture store with interior designers. And he is an excellent businessman. And people still ask him to come speak to colleges about how to be an entrepreneur. And so that's where this podcast really has gone. It's a gritty, real world advice from people who've been in the trenches, and hopefully you pick up a few gold nuggets along the way in the Safari.
That's all you can hope for. I mean, I pick up a gold nugget every time I talk to somebody, especially entrepreneurs, because there's just so much to learn. There's so much to learn, and I'm just glad to hear colleges are actually bringing in real world people to talk about business.
Right. Yeah, I know that's, so I'm going to do it again this summer. I'm going to push it out to all the schools and see if I can't get more interest, because I had a lot of fun with it. You know, young people are just, obviously they give that youth gives you enthusiasm, gives you more energy.
Yeah.
And I love giving back to these guys. It was a lot of fun last year. I had fun talking to them about the things we talked about, and I got real with them on what was tough, but I also talked about things that you just didn't get taught in college, that networking is big, and being and selling yourself all the time. You guess what? We're all in sales. You're always selling yourself. And with the digital world that they're all in today, which I didn't grow up with.
Yeah.
Thank God, because I didn't get in as much trouble that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So these guys in their digital world, what do you want your digital personality to be? What do you want to be your brand? Because you better start thinking about you as a personal brand today. That's going to be even more important later on. You're going to college and you're learning about finances and econ and global this and global that. But what are you learning about yourself and your brand? And what are you doing in college to take full advantage of it if you're going to go do college? And I think a lot of people waste their time in college and probably didn't need to go drop all that money. They could have come out there real world and gotten real world advice and figured their way out.
Well, that really is an interesting, so the minute you said you were talking about what's their brand, because I have these, I'm sure you do all the time. Like, what's the brand? What's the niche? How do we narrow it down? How do we get from point A to point B and do all this stuff? And it's constant. It's constant work and trying to figure it out, and it's always changing, and I'm evaluating it all the time. But I really, until you said it, I think thought about it, but not to the degree that when you just said it, it kind of hit me differently that these kids, because they're on social media, they're on their phones all the time. They're creating their brand, whether they know it or not.
Absolutely. 100%. They do it and they don't even know they're doing it. And I will tell you that, I just recently had a birthday and 4 of the kids actually pinged me, happy birthday, man. And one of the kids pinged me with, thank you again for the class last year. I went ahead and deleted my Twitter account because he had done some probably things that he thought were probably irresponsible when he was in high school. And now he's getting older and realizing his brand's going to be affected. And every one of those kids got on LinkedIn. We trained them on how to just go out and set up a profile, because if you go out on LinkedIn as a 20-something-year-old, guess who likes to link in with you? Us old guys do. And if you bring me and say, hey, can you take a look at my resume, which 2 of them have just done because they're looking for jobs for the summer. I'm like, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll give you 15 minutes of feedback on your resume, man. That's awesome. Think about those things we weren't taught to do. That if somebody just would have said, hey, you know what? Sometimes these old guys don't mind talking to you. You can ask them as long as you have a great personality.
No, listen, it's really a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up, because, while I may be, have a better idea of LinkedIn and branding and marketing at this point, where I'm weak, incredibly weak, technology. And these kids, they have no fear when it comes to technology.
So I'm in all kinds of social media. I am the customer service freak on Instagram and TikTok. I feel like I'm probably the oldest TikToker out there, but I'm also on LinkedIn as my name, Chris Lalomia, and all that. And each of those, we talked about this too. Each of those medias are different, but what's your brand on each of those medias and how do you do it? So I try to do some of these things, right? Like videos or whatever. And it takes me 30 minutes, which is a waste of time. I had this kid working with me. He'd have it done in like 2 minutes. And he's coming in tomorrow, taking a morning off from school and going to come over and work with me. I guarantee you in 3 hours, the kid will have my entire quarter figured out on what we're going to be posting for Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. It's unreal. I mean, he'll have it done and he creates it all and he can do it 100 times faster than me. So there you go. Like you said, these kids, they're not afraid of technology. They embrace it and they've got it.
Send him over.
Yeah, right.
Send him over. Well, speaking of technology and social media and all that, before we wrap up, tell everybody, and we'll put this in the show notes, of course, how can people find you? I mean, now we're in the Atlanta area, not that far. Well, it feels like we're not that far apart, but with traffic, yeah, now all of a sudden we are. So how can people get a hold of you and get a hold of the podcast and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, you can always find me on LinkedIn, Chris Lalomia. There's not many of us out there. It's a pretty unique name. You got to be able to spell it. But you find me on Instagram at customerservice.freak. You'll find me on Facebook, Chris Lalomia. The Safari Podcast is out there at safaripodcast.com. I actually published a book that I'm very proud of that I did it. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be, but it's called From the Zoo to the Wild. And you can always hit me up on my email, chris@thetrustedtoolbox.com. If you ping me, I'd be happy to give you 30 minutes of just shooting the breeze. If you want, anybody who wants any advice, you want to reach out and say, man, I liked what you said. And you know what? I just have a couple of questions for you. Hey, I'm in. That's one of those things of success that I can say now is I have time to do that.
Yeah.
Not a lot of time, but I'll find it.
Well, it's fun to give back. It really and truly is. And I try to do as much of that as I possibly can. Listen, if there's one thing we didn't touch on today, a little golden nugget you want to leave everybody with, please, is there anything you could think of that?
The gold nugget, I would say, we talked about the kids for a minute, and of course that's what I call them. But
yeah,
I don't think you have to wait until you're 37 years old to be an entrepreneur. I could have probably given it a shot earlier. I don't want anybody ever to think I'm not old enough or I'm not ready enough. I'm saying do it, but do it with a plan. I don't care if you're 15. I don't care if you're 65. Get a plan and go do it. And you're never too old to start it again. Now, that being said, I'm not really sure I want to start another business when I'm 65, but I definitely want to stay in business. So that would be my advice. Jump in and go do it.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And I mean, you can recover from a lot of mistakes when you're 20. They're a little bit harder to recover from when you're 60. So
yeah, there's a lot of advantages for doing it earlier, and a lot of disadvantages. I didn't have as much in my toolbox, as it were, to go start this company until I was that age of being able to run a large P&L and do consulting and technology and what doesn't matter. But you're right. I had a lot less to lose at 20, 21, 22 because I didn't have anything.
Yep. Well, awesome. Chris, it has been a pleasure to have you on today. We got to talk a little business and I love that. So thanks again for being on the True Man podcast.
Thanks for having me. I loved it.
Awesome. Take care.